The new US Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced significant changes on her first day leading the Justice Department, including an order to pause federal funding for sanctuary cities. This is a big deal, and this is the headline from the New York Post. She's committed to combating the misuse of the legal system and also requiring prosecutors to seek the death penalty in suitable cases, especially focusing on violent drug trafficking. Bondi plans to establish the Weaponization Working Group to investigate past law enforcement actions for political bias, including high-profile cases against Donald Trump. Here she is, of course, being sworn in not so long ago. A big moment with Donald Trump slightly to the left there, off camera, but you can see as this is all taking place. Give us an idea who Pam Bondi is.
Sure. So Pam Bondi, she has spent her career in law enforcement and, of course, as an attorney from Florida. She really went after the drug cartels, and she is a staunch supporter of trying to get people rounded up who break the law when it comes to human trafficking. So that is something that, clearly falls very much in line with President Donald Trump and, of course, his new Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, as we see these ICE raids continue. And so, when it comes to that human trafficking, it's something that, she has given that directive to move forward because it is such a massive issue, not just in the United States, but really around the world. But what's so fascinating here on day one is she is pulling the federal funding for sanctuary cities, because if you are a sanctuary city, for example, like New York or Los Angeles, and you're getting federal funding, and you say that if ICE officers come into the city, we will not cooperate and help with them, even if one of these illegal migrants are already in the prison, they will not help them with this information or allow them access. And so why, the Attorney General is saying that should federal funds be going to these sanctuary cities who are staunchly against what the government is trying to do in terms of safety. So I'm sure that will be legally challenged at some point. But additionally, she has started this weaponization working group, and they will be looking at cases, and they're trying to determine whether or not it was a weaponization of the law and that it was done for a political reason. Specifically, she's going to be looking at the attorney Alvin Bragg and, of course, special counsel Jack Smith and the New York Attorney General Letitia James. And clearly they all went after her boss, Donald Trump. And so that will be very fascinating to see, because most likely we will be hearing from Democrats to say that this was a directive and, that she's only doing this to gain favor with her boss. But it's not just about Donald Trump. She's also going after several Catholics in the United States, and also parents. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, targeted a lot of these groups, so Catholics and also parents, at PTA meetings, saying that they were, in some way harmful to society. And we've seen that through memos that were leaked. So, this is part of this idea from this new administration to say they wanted to take politics, out of the law and to just, simply pursue what's right and wrong. So it will be interesting to see with these working groups what the, outcome will be.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Jack Smith. I mean, he won't be looking for a sanctuary city. He'll probably be looking for a sanctuary country anytime soon. Now, the idea of pulling federal funding, is it really going to happen? I mean, I know that she's announced it on day one of her new term as the Attorney General, but, when we look into what does federal funding go to, it's critical programs funded by the federal dollars, including public safety initiatives, disaster relief, housing support, and healthcare services. If there is a disaster, let's say a hurricane somewhere, or perhaps even a massive wildfire in Los Angeles, is the federal government really not going to assist, and what impact could that have?
So it's very curious to say what is behind this. Is it just that they are taking a tough stance to say they mean business? We'll cut the funding if you don't cooperate, and then potentially these sanctuary cities cooperate, and then the funding is restored. Clearly, if there is some type of federal emergency, the government will be able to fund them somehow, even if it's not under this federal funding. They could put it under emergency funding. So, what's the end result here? I think that they're looking for cooperation from these sanctuary cities, specifically for these raids of illegal criminal migrants. So that will be very interesting to see what happens, because, as I mentioned, I am sure that the paperwork is already being drawn out to, somehow legally sue or try to stop this potential initiative from being enacted.
Another big story today I just want to briefly touch on because it's somewhat connected. But here's Donald Trump surrounded by school children announcing and signing an executive order preventing transgender women from competing in female categories of sport. So the order provides guidance, regulations, legal interpretations, and will enlist the Department of Education, a department that he wants to go, to investigate these high schools thought to be non-compliant. Now, Republicans say that it restores fairness to sport. LGBT advocacy groups, human rights organisations describing the move as discriminatory. We know that this is a really difficult subject for a lot of people. It has been a subject, the trans issue, you would say, has really been one that has changed a lot of minds when it comes to DEI in the workplace as well. For some, it went too far. Just looking at these images, Veronica, what are your thoughts seeing President Trump surrounded by children signing an executive order like this?
So if you listen to a lot of the female athletes, some of which were in either college or some went on to try to make it into the Olympics, they have talked about how they felt in this situation, saying that, oftentimes if they were in locker rooms or needing to shower, that they felt uncomfortable. And also just biologically looking at muscle mass, comparing someone who is female versus someone who, was born biologically male, that, so much can be different in terms of muscle and tissue and what they're able to do. And so they have put a very compelling and more what they're calling a common sense approach to this, saying that females should be the ones who are competing. And of course, as you mentioned, we have heard pushback from that. And as we've talked about before with executive orders, these EOs, depending on who's in the EOs, you can, with the power of the pen, do things, but then with the power of the pen, you can undo things. So we do know President Trump has called on Congress to take up this issue. So that will be something to watch to see, what lawmakers will do and if they will officially make this law of the land moving forward. They would clearly, need to have to put a proposal out there and vote.